Joining the show now, he covers the Timberwolves for the St. Paul Pioneer Press. He is Jace Frederick with us here on Jake and Ben. Jace, thanks for a few minutes. I understand practice is about to get started.
It's fastly approaching, but thanks so much for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
So I don't want to say this run is unexpected. I think before the season we talked and I had said I thought Minnesota was going to host a first-round playoff series. Conference finals is a different conversation, and going into the conference finals is, I think, really maybe an argument is the best team in basketball right now. For somebody who lives in Minnesota, how has the town responded? How has the city responded, and where are people with this basketball team?
Yeah, it's on fire, frankly. Like, this is oftentimes like the Vikings rule the state, and then, it's kind of a split between basketball and hockey. But frankly, this town just kind of looks for a winner. Hasn't won a major men's pro championship since 91. Haven't been that many close calls since then, frankly. People get behind a championship contender, and this team is the first one that they've had here in quite some time. So, I think there are even some hockey fans who are becoming basketball fans at the moment, things like that. Everybody is very fired up about what this team has done.
All right, Jay, so you're talking to two people who covered Rudy Gobert's entire career in Utah. I remember, his the day after he was drafted in the press conference and all that stuff. So I was fascinated to see how Minnesota would use him, because we certainly are familiar with what a unique a player he is, but how effective he can be. And I guess my question is about Chris Finch and how he's chosen to use Rudy Gobert, because I think it's brilliant. I think Rudy's playing better, hot take here, better in Minnesota than he even played here in Utah. So I'm curious to your thoughts on how Chris Finch has evolved Rudy into the lineup and how Rudy is playing now.
Yeah, part of the benefit, I think, is just the number of perimeter defenders Minnesota has. I just remember a couple of those Utah series where, Royce O'Neal is the best perimeter defender. No knock on him, but he's not a high-end perimeter defender anyway. So Minnesota has so many different pieces that they really can kind of play like chess defensively at any point, given what the opponent can do. And oftentimes for them, that is putting Rudy on the other team's worst player, and having Rudy just totally be that free safety who can kind of patrol the floor, and that can mean calling out coverages, and that can mean just being that kind of final line of defense where if you get past Jaden McDaniels, now you have to beat Rudy Gobert at the rim, and if you're getting past Jaden McDaniels, you're probably not doing it with a straight line drive, full head of steam. So Rudy, it has maximized Rudy's impact, and they're just not afraid either to switch up coverages to kind of use Rudy a little bit more like a Swiss Army knife. It's not just drop coverage Rudy Gobert here. It's however he can best be utilized, equipped, weaponized really to slow the opponent down. Dallas here, Rudy will probably be more up on the level in pick and roll, which I know is not something he did much in Utah. So they're not afraid to ask Rudy to do different things, and they have so many other pieces that they can really kind of morph defensively in what they want to do in any given game.
I think what's amazing is the narrative around Rudy Gobert has just so dramatically shifted. And look, there are still guys like Draymond Green who are always going to try and push a negative front for Rudy, but everyone recognizes how valuable that trade has been now for Minnesota within, and a crazy turnaround in 12 months. How much of that is due to Mike Conley's impact and what he has done to the team since he's gotten there versus D'Angelo Russell?
It's massive. And I would say that Mike is probably their second least replaceable player behind just Ant, just because, and you saw in Game 5 of the West semis, they need that perimeter playmaker, and they also need that decision maker, the guy who's getting them in the right spots, making sure their head's always in the right place. If teams are loading up against Ant, well, now they can just run a Mike Rudy pick and roll and generate good offense there against a non-stack defense. So Mike is incredibly needed, but just the general shift in accepting of Rudy, because so often I think just the perception for NBA players is just this guy sometimes airballs free throws. This guy sometimes blows layups. This guy's one of the best players in basketball. This guy's making this much money. That doesn't make sense. So when you get a guy like Mike who just fully understands everything about the game and is here is what Rudy is doing that is making your life far easier. Yes, defensively, he's saving your butt on the back line, but also offensively. Do you see how hard he's rolling? Do you see the guy that's sucking in from the corner? Do you see that that's why you're wide open? Do you see these screens that he's setting for you to make your pass to the rim 10 times easier than it should be? Everybody, I think, has realized, oh, okay, yeah, Rudy Gobert actually does a ton for us. He's a great player. And then when that's the case, now you trust Rudy more. Now you're I'm going to give him the ball in the roll because he's earned it. And I think Mike has just opened everyone's eyes to here is what Rudy Gobert is doing for you guys that you're not noticing on a daily basis. So pay it forward too.
What's Ant like in his day-to-day interactions? What kind of personality is he? We see, I loved his post-game with TNT after Game 7. Him talking about defense was really rang my bell. But what's he like in day-to-day interaction?
It's pretty good. To be honest, like he's not the biggest fan of always doing media. So like sometimes after practice he's like, really? But post-game he's always there to chat, and he's pretty like even when he's done, like he'll sit there and you can BS with him or whatever for a couple minutes, or he'll dive a little bit more into like what was happening. So he's pretty good with us even on the local level on a day-to-day basis. But there's no question that when he knows like it's national, when he knows like it's a post-game press conference, it's going to be seen everywhere, like he dials it up another notch. There's no question about that.
I hate to do this because it's kind of the problem with NBA culture right now, but truthfully the CBA and the financials require it. Right. How long is this window open for Minnesota? And I will say this because everyone in Utah is watching, hoping this roster falls apart so the draft picks end up being very valuable for the Jazz in the long run.
Yeah, I think it's probably at least another year. The only person who is in the rotation right now that, unless they decide to go a different direction, will not be on it is probably Kyle Anderson, and that's we're looking at guy number like 8. I think this team should probably have another year together, assuming that it doesn't fall apart here. I'd be surprised. They'll have to eat a big luxury tax bill this next season here as all these extensions for Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns kick in. So like they'll have an expensive roster, but it's one they can keep together at no cost. Like these guys are all signed in, so next year should be pretty good too. And then it's more of like tougher to re-sign guys, tougher to okay, are we going to eat that bill again? Obviously, if you're winning championships, you'll find more ways around it. But yeah, even under the CBA, they can keep this together for a while because these guys are all kind of signed long term here.
So I couldn't help but laugh when A-Rod was front and center in Denver. And I realize I'm asking you a question that you could probably answer in about a half an hour. But take us through the ownership drama and where we stand now and exactly why it's falling apart.
Yeah, the exact why is kind of still a little bit unknown. Like the other side with Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lowry will tell you, like, oh, Glenn's having – like seller's remorse and look at how good the team is now. And of course, and he could sell for a lot more money. And of course he tried to back out of this. And Ben Taylor's like, no, these guys missed these X, Y, and Z on the contract. And in my mind, then that it's just done. That's kind of what will be litigated as to did they miss stuff? And is that enough for somebody to then just call off the deal? They've gone through mediation and that was never going to solve anything. It's going to head to arbitration. At that point, like I think we're looking at later in the summer. Like that will not be a thing that is played out whatsoever. I think here for the rest of the playoffs, from my understanding, like that will be post NBA finals. So I don't expect any news on that for quite some time here. But then what'll be interesting is even if arbitration goes in the direction of Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez, which I would not be surprised if it is. Usually, like there aren't too many hard set dates where like, oh, you missed this by a day, you don't get the team anymore. Just in terms of like the spirit of these contracts. But then they'll still have to be approved as like majority owners by the NBA, by the Board of Governors. And Glenn Taylor's got a lot of friends there. So if there's like a September vote after Lowry and Rodriguez win in litigation, like I don't know if that's the dunk either. So this will be an interesting thing to play out over the next few months that has some layers to it. But I think right now we can focus on the basketball, knowing that stuff is a little ways down the road now.
Jace, where are the Minnesota Timberwolves in the pecking order of sports in Minnesota? You talked about it obviously being a Vikings town, and they just won a winner. But when you have 4 major league franchises like that, and with all due respect, the Timberwolves have been the worst franchise in all of professional sports for a long time. Like, do they have a foothold, or is this just kind of like a new thing people are excited about?
Honestly, every time they're good, Target Center is full. It just hasn't been very good. I would say in the general pecking order, it probably does go like Vikings, Twins. Twins just dominate summer generally. So I would say they probably have the second most ardent fan support here. And then it really is coin flip between the Wild and Wolves. They are just kind of like two separate fan bases, but like runs like this, if this team has success, it will be so easy for them to jump up to number 2. And we've kind of seen that here with the excitement. Like a consistent winner, any consistent winner would slot in right behind the Vikings, and the Wolves look like they're on their way to that.
I think the Oakland A's would like to talk with you about the worst franchise in sports, Ben. There's a lot of bad ones out there. Give us a tale of the tape on this matchup. How do you see it?
I do think that the edge probably goes to Minnesota just in terms of like total roster, but Dallas presents a little bit of a different defensive issue just in terms of like the shooting, the way they can spread it out. They can put 4 shooters out there. Luka Doncic is, even though Minnesota has like a Jaden McDaniels, like it's a lot more now just like pick and roll, and Rudy's got to be up at the level. And then like, okay, if they get it to Daniel Gafford behind Rudy, who has to play up at the level, how can Minnesota hold up there? Kickouts, like I do think Dallas will generate some good looks. And if they shoot like they did against Oklahoma City, they can give Minnesota some problems and they can score. And certainly they've been really good defensively since they retooled their roster. Like I think at the end of the day that Minnesota probably has too much for Dallas, but I think Dallas, I wouldn't be surprised at all if this game goes deep and if Dallas makes a real run at winning it. Dallas has Derek Jones Jr. who can maybe I wouldn't be surprised if they try to like play Ant more honestly than Denver and Phoenix did, because Jones Jr. is probably the best perimeter defender that Ant has seen yet in these playoffs. So we'll see what Ant is able to do to that if he makes Dallas kind of shift their mindset. And also, like Dallas has actual rim protectors, which neither Phoenix or Denver did. So Minnesota's going to have to shift a lot what it does defensively or what it took advantage of defensively and offensively. So it'll be a pretty interesting beginning of the series here just to see how things play out and which team forces the other to adjust.
He covers the Timberwolves for the St. Paul Pioneer Press. He is Jace Frederick with us here on Jake and Ben. And Jace, thank you so much. And prepare yourself because we're going to bother you often as this run continues.
All right. Sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. There you go. That's Jace Frederick. Again, covers the T-Wolves. Follow all his series coverage at the St. Paul Pioneer Press. And we appreciate him taking some time for us.